There is a moment that stays with a surgeon long after the operating room lights go dark. A man, 71 years old, retired schoolteacher, grandchildren waiting at home, and his heart, a muscle that had worked faithfully for 7 decades without a single day off, was now fighting against itself. His name was Harold. And when his daughter called me 3 days after his second stroke, her voice barely above a whisper, she asked me one question. She said, "Doctor, could we have prevented this?" That question has stayed with me. Harold had not smoked in 30 years. He exercised, he took his medications, and every single morning, for the last decade, he ate what he believed was a healthy breakfast. Orange juice, whole grain toast with margarine, a bowl of instant oatmeal with fruit syrup on top, a glass of low-fat milk, and a small cup of yogurt, the kind with fruit flavors mixed in. Every item on that list, every single one, was silently driving his blood pressure higher. Here's what nobody tells you. The breakfast foods that your generation was taught to trust, the ones labeled heart healthy, the ones your doctor may have even recommended, contain hidden compounds that act on your cardiovascular system in ways that are particularly destructive after the age of 60, not mildly inconvenient. Destructive, and the mechanisms are not complicated. Once you understand them, you will never look at your morning plate the same way again. Stay with me. Because what I am about to share with you took me 25 years in cardiothoracic surgery and over 2,000 open heart procedures to understand fully. And I want to put that understanding in your hands today. My name is Dr. Marcus Reed. I have spent the last 3 decades inside operating rooms, holding human hearts in my hands, while families waited outside those doors not knowing if their husband, their mother, their brother was going to make it. I have seen things on that table that textbooks do not prepare you for. I have held beating hearts in my hands. I have felt what uncontrolled hypertension does to cardiac tissue over time, the thickening, the stiffening, the exhaustion written into the muscle itself. And I will tell you something that may disturb you. Many of the people on that table were doing everything right, according to the advice they had received. They were following the low-fat guidelines. They were eating their whole grains. They were drinking their fruit juices. They were following a system that was never actually designed around what aging arteries need. It was designed around marketing, around outdated research, and around the assumption that a 60-year-old body responds the same way a 35-year-old body does. It does not. And that difference is everything. After 60, the body undergoes a series of changes that fundamentally alter how it processes food. The kidneys become less efficient at filtering sodium, which means even moderate salt intake now creates pressure buildups that a younger kidney would handle without difficulty. The arterial walls begin to lose their elasticity, a process called arteriosclerosis, which means the vessels that carry blood to your brain and heart have less capacity to expand and absorb pressure spikes. The endothelium, the delicate inner lining of your blood vessels, becomes more vulnerable to inflammatory damage. And the renin-angiotensin system, which regulates blood pressure at a hormonal level, becomes more reactive and harder to calm down once it is activated. Think of your vascular system at 65 like a garden hose that has been left in the sun for years. It still works, but it is stiffer. It cracks more easily under pressure. And if you keep increasing the pressure inside it, it does not flex the way it once did. It resists, and that resistance is what your blood pressure reading is measuring. According to the American Heart Association, nearly 75% of adults over 65 in the United States have hypertension. 75%. That is not a rare condition. That is the statistical norm. And yet the dietary guidance most seniors are following was not updated to reflect what we now know about aging physiology. That gap between what science understands and what patients are being told is where the danger lives. The 5 foods I am going to describe to you are all common. Some of them are in your kitchen right now. None of them are foods you would suspect. And each one has a specific mechanism by which it raises blood pressure in the aging cardiovascular system. I am going to give you the mechanism, the risk, and the specific fix, because knowing the problem without knowing the solution is just anxiety. That is not what you came here for. The first food is fruit juice, not soda, not candy. Fruit juice, orange juice, apple juice, grapefruit juice, cranberry juice, the kind sold in cartons with pictures of orchards and sunshine on the label. The kind that generations of Americans poured every morning because they were told it was a healthy start to the day. Here is the mechanism. When you eat a whole orange, the fiber inside that fruit slows the absorption of sugar dramatically. The fructose enters your bloodstream gradually, and your body can manage it. When that same orange is pressed into juice, the fiber is gone. What remains is a concentrated bolus of fructose that enters your bloodstream very rapidly. Your liver, which processes fructose, is immediately overwhelmed. To compensate, it converts the excess fructose into a substance called uric acid. And here's what most people do not know. Elevated uric acid directly inhibits the production of nitric oxide in your blood vessels. Nitric oxide is the molecule your arteries use to relax and dilate. Without it, your vessels stay constricted. Constricted vessels mean higher pressure. Write that down. After 60, this process is even more pronounced because kidney function, which normally clears uric acid from the blood, has typically declined. So the uric acid stays elevated longer. The nitric oxide suppression is more sustained, and the blood pressure impact is not a spike. It is a baseline elevation that sits there, day after day, compounding over months and years. In 2015, a study published in the journal Nutrients followed adults over 60 and found that daily fruit juice consumption was associated with measurably higher systolic blood pressure compared to whole fruit consumption, even when total caloric intake was identical. The fruit, the juice, same calories. Different blood pressure outcome. The fix is not complicated. Replace the juice with the whole fruit. Not a smoothie. Smoothies still break down the fiber matrix. The actual fruit, eaten slowly, chewed, your arteries will feel the difference within weeks. The second food on this list may surprise you even more than the first. It is flavored yogurt, not plain Greek yogurt, the flavored kind. Strawberry, blueberry, peach, vanilla, the kind marketed explicitly to health-conscious older adults, often with the words heart healthy or probiotic or low fat on the container. Flavored yogurt, even the small 6-ounce single-serve containers, typically contains between 20 and 30 grams of added sugar. That is more sugar than a glazed donut. The yogurt base itself may have modest nutritional value, but the sugar added to make it palatable turns it into a mechanism for blood pressure elevation through a process called advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. Here's what that means in plain terms. When sugar combines with proteins in your bloodstream, and this happens faster in older bodies with slightly elevated baseline blood sugar, it creates damaged, sticky molecules that attach to the walls of your arteries. These molecules trigger inflammation, and inflamed arterial walls stiffen. Stiffened arteries raise blood pressure, not occasionally, chronically. After 60, this process runs faster because the body's ability to clear AGEs has diminished. You accumulate them more quickly. And morning, after morning of flavored yogurt is not adding up to a healthy gut. It is adding up to progressive arterial stiffness. The fix, plain Greek yogurt. Full fat or low fat, but unflavored, with whole berries added by you. You control the sugar. You keep the probiotic benefit. You eliminate the age cascade. That is the trade. Now, before we get to the third food on this list, I need you to understand something. Because what I am about to share with you changes the way the next 3 items land. The first 2 foods I described work on your blood pressure through well-understood mechanisms. The next one, the third food, operates through a pathway that almost no mainstream dietary advice addresses. And it is the one that, in my clinical experience, catches the most people completely off guard. Stay with me. The third food is margarine and vegetable oil spreads, the kind sold in tubs, the kind marketed for decades as the heart-healthy alternative to butter, the kind recommended specifically to older adults with cardiovascular risk. The mechanism here involves a class of fats called omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acids, particularly linoleic acid, which are present in very high concentrations in soybean oil, corn oil, sunflower oil, and the spreads made from them. When you consume these fats in excess, and most Americans eating a standard Western diet consume them in enormous excess relative to omega-3 fats, they drive up the production of pro-inflammatory signaling molecules called eicosanoids, particularly prostaglandins and leukotrienes. These molecules directly constrict blood vessels. They increase platelet aggregation. They promote the kind of low-grade, systemic vascular inflammation that is now understood to be a primary driver of hypertension, not just a consequence of it, a cause. The ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fats in the human diet should ideally be somewhere between 2 to 1 and 4 to 1. In the average senior eating a standard American diet, that ratio is closer to 20 to 1. Some studies have measured it as high as 40 to 1. The margarine on your morning toast is one of the largest contributors to that imbalance. Here is what makes this particularly relevant to your morning routine. Most people spread margarine on whole grain toast, which sounds like a responsible breakfast choice. But when you pair the omega-6 load of the margarine with the blood sugar spike of even whole grain bread, you create a double inflammatory trigger that your arteries have to absorb before you have even left the table. The fix is a return to real fat, not margarine. Not vegetable oil spreads. Butter, in modest amounts, from grass-fed sources if available, or avocado, or extra virgin olive oil. These fats do not carry the omega-6 inflammatory burden. They do not constrict your arteries. And the research on olive oil and blood pressure in older adults is some of the strongest dietary evidence we have, consistent, replicated, mechanistically understood. The fourth food is instant oatmeal. And I want to be careful here because this one requires some precision. Oats, in their natural form, are genuinely valuable for cardiovascular health. The beta-glucan fiber in whole oats has measurable blood pressure lowering effects. This is real. This is not in dispute. The problem is what the food industry did to oats in the name of convenience. Instant oatmeal is pre-cooked and pre-processed to the point where the fiber structure is dramatically altered. The starch becomes highly available, meaning it is absorbed very rapidly. What was once a slow, steady release of energy becomes, in the instant variety, a glycemic spike nearly as steep as white bread. And the packets. The flavored packets, maple and brown sugar, apple cinnamon, honey, and oats contain between 12 and 20 grams of added sugar per serving, on top of the rapidly absorbed starch. You are beginning your day with a substantial blood sugar spike, which triggers an insulin response, which activates the sympathetic nervous system, which releases norepinephrine, which constricts blood vessels. That is 4 steps from oatmeal to elevated blood pressure. 4 steps, and each one is biochemically documented. After 60, insulin sensitivity is typically reduced. The spike is higher. The response is more pronounced. The blood pressure impact is greater. The fix: whole rolled oats, not instant. Cooked on the stovetop, which takes 7 minutes. Topped with cinnamon, which has a clinically observed blood pressure lowering effect, and whole berries. No syrup packets. No brown sugar. The fiber structure of the rolled oat is intact. The glycemic response is gradual, and your morning cardiovascular burden is fundamentally different. The fifth food is processed deli meat. The sliced turkey, the ham, the chicken strips that many seniors add to their breakfast plate or put on a morning sandwich in the name of protein. These meats are preserved with sodium nitrite and loaded with sodium, often between 400 and 900 milligrams per 2-ounce serving. To put that in context, most cardiology guidelines now recommend seniors stay under 1,500 milligrams of sodium per day. A modest serving of deli meat at breakfast can consume more than half of that entire daily budget before 9 in the morning. But the sodium level alone does not capture the full mechanism. Sodium nitrite, the preservative compound used to prevent bacterial growth and maintain the pink color of processed meat, converts in the body to nitrosamines under certain conditions, particularly in an acidic stomach environment. Nitrosamines are not only carcinogenic, they also impair the same nitric oxide signaling pathway we discussed with fructose. Your arteries, receiving both the direct pressure from sodium and the nitric oxide suppression from nitrosamines, are working under compound pressure. For older adults, the sodium retention issue is especially acute. Aging kidneys process sodium more slowly. The water retention that follows a high-sodium meal persists longer. The pressure stays elevated longer. And if you are already managing hypertension with medication, processed meat at breakfast can blunt the effectiveness of that medication for hours. The fix is real protein without the preservation load. Eggs. 2 whole eggs, prepared in olive oil or butter, provide excellent protein. 0 added sodium, and the choline in the yolk actively supports vascular function. Canned wild salmon, rinsed, provides omega-3 fats and high-quality protein with no sodium nitrite. Unsalted nut butter on a small slice of whole grain bread is another option. The protein is there, the sodium burden is not. I have stood in that operating room and watched what we were not able to fix. There are things a surgeon can do. We can bypass a blocked artery. We can repair a damaged valve. We can restart a heart, but we cannot undo 20 years of arterial damage from chronic inflammation and sustained hypertension. We cannot give back the elasticity that has been slowly removed from vessel walls by a decade of uric acid buildup. We cannot reverse what happened in the kitchen every morning before the patient even knew there was a problem to address. I remember a woman, her name was Dorothy, 68 years old, former nurse, who came to me after her second hypertensive episode. She knew the medical terminology. She understood what her numbers meant. And she was furious. Not at me, at herself, because she told me she had been careful. She had been following everything she thought she knew. She had been drinking her orange juice because it had vitamin C. She had been eating her flavored yogurt because it said probiotic on the label. She said something I have never forgotten. She looked at me and she said, "Nobody told me what careful actually looked like." Here's what nobody tells you. Careful does not mean low fat. Careful does not mean the label says healthy. Careful, for a cardiovascular system that is 60 or 70 years old, means understanding the specific mechanisms that matter for your specific biology. And that information has not been making its way into the standard dietary guidance your generation received. Dorothy spent 14 months applying the changes I described to her. She worked with a registered dietitian. She eliminated the 5 foods we discussed and replaced them with the alternatives. 14 months later, her systolic blood pressure had dropped from 162 to 128. Her physician reduced her medications from 4 to 2. She told me on her follow-up visit that she felt, for the first time in years, like she understood what her body needed. That conversation meant more to me than I can adequately say. It is never too late to make these changes. I want to be clear about that. The vascular system retains a capacity for repair and adaptation well into the 8th and 9th decade of life. The endothelium, that inner lining of your blood vessels, responds to reduced inflammatory burden relatively quickly. Nitric oxide production can improve within weeks of reducing fructose and omega-6 intake. Arterial stiffness, while harder to reverse, can stop progressing when the inflammatory drivers are removed. The body, when given the right conditions, moves toward healing. That is what I have seen. Not in one patient, in many. So let us review what we have covered today, because I want these 5 items to be clear in your mind. 1. Fruit juice, including orange juice and apple juice, drives uric acid elevation that suppresses the nitric oxide your arteries need to stay relaxed. Replace it with the whole fruit. 2. Flavored yogurt contains enough added sugar to accelerate advanced glycation end products, which stiffen your arterial walls. Replace it with plain Greek yogurt and add whole berries yourself. 3. Margarine and vegetable oil spreads load your system with omega-6 fats that drive vascular inflammation and constriction. Replace them with butter, avocado, or olive oil. 4. Instant oatmeal and flavored oat packets create glycemic spikes that activate the sympathetic nervous system and raise blood pressure through an insulin-mediated cascade. Replace them with whole rolled oats, prepared simply, topped with cinnamon. 5. Processed deli meats combine high sodium with nitrite compounds that suppress nitric oxide and drive fluid retention. Replace them with eggs, canned salmon, or unsalted nut butter. Starting tonight, look at what you have in your kitchen. Not next week. Tonight, check the yogurt container. Look at the oatmeal packet. Read the label on the margarine tub. You do not have to replace everything at once. Replace one item this week, then another. The cumulative effect of these changes, sustained over months, is what moved Dorothy from 4 medications to 2. I want to ask you something directly. Of the 5 foods we discussed today, which one surprised you the most? Leave that in the comments below. Not just the name of the food. Tell me why it surprised you. I read these comments. Your responses help me understand what information is reaching people and what is still being missed. If you know someone over 60 who eats these foods every morning, a spouse, a sibling, a close friend, please share this video with them today. Not because you want to alarm them, because information, given at the right time, changes outcomes. Harold's daughter wished someone had shared this with her father years earlier. You can be that person for someone in your life. If you found value in what we covered, subscribe to this channel. We publish new content every week on the specific science of cardiovascular health for seniors. Not generic health advice, not recycled guidelines, but the mechanisms that actually matter for aging physiology. Your heart has been working for you every single minute of your life. It has never taken a day off. It has never asked for anything except the conditions to do its job. Give it those conditions starting with tomorrow morning's breakfast. I want to close by being straightforward with you. I am a surgeon, not your personal physician, and nothing in this video replaces the guidance of the doctor who knows your complete medical history and your specific medications. If you are managing hypertension or any cardiovascular condition, please discuss these dietary changes with your doctor before implementing them, particularly if you are on blood pressure medication, since effective dietary changes can alter how your medications behave. The goal of everything I share here is to add to the conversation you are having with your healthcare team, not to replace it. You deserve both good information and a good doctor. I hope this video helps you bring better questions to that conversation.